I want you to think back to when you were a kid, when you were a little wee gamer, having your brother help you unlock Captain Falcon in Smash Bros. Because you can't beat Classic Mode in under 20 minutes. I was 7. What was gaming like? What were you playing? Who were your favorite developers? Even going into your teen years, who were the ones who made you stand up, take a bow, and open your wallets to give them money for their next game? Okay, stop thinking. It's not like that anymore. Every industry evolves and grows and changes and looks almost unrecognizable to how it was even 10 years ago, which when you think about it is not that long ago. And with gaming, none of that has been more true than with its developers. All of us have that one developer or franchise that we grew up on, that we look back now and it's just Jim Leahy stumbling down the stairs. The studio you look at now and you just sit there wondering, what the hell happened to you? But the good news is that even though these once great studios have started to fall, the hole they would leave behind is being filled by other studios that have taken up the mantle and are doing their part to provide that same experience we all used to love. And that brings us to now. Which of the old guard have been getting older and losing brain function? And which ones have been taking their place among the best? How is the gaming landscape changing? And more importantly, what do these changes represent? Well, you know what they say, we must adjust to the times. So strap in, boys and girls, and let's get down to business. Now, before we get into the individual studios, it's important to keep in mind the most common and most important reason why some of these studios would fall off like they have, and it's real simple. Talent leaving. No matter how you used to look at some of these places, the sad truth is that it doesn't matter who you are as a developer. If the masterminds behind a great game and the talented devs that helped make those games leave the studio, then you're obviously not going to get that same quality that you would have gotten if those people were there. So when you see an article like 70% of Naughty Dog staff that worked on Uncharted 4 have left the studio, I don't care how good you've been, that should really scare you. The studio is just an inanimate object. The logo's not about to grow 100 hands and start programming AI behavior. Wait, is that how Bethesda does it? The people are the most vital part of a developer's success. But you know, if you're not careful, the people can also be part of the developer's failure. Which brings us to our first down boy, and that down boy has a Pip-Boy screaming, "Yeah, boy!" It's Bethesda. I think if you asked any gamer around the early 2010s who the best developer in the industry was, I bet you a pretty big portion of them would have said Bethesda. If you wanted to immerse yourself in a massive open world where you can go where you want and do whatever you want, you called up Todd Howard and had him drop a nuke on your social life. Even though the games were far from perfect, the overall experience that you had in the world was what made Bethesda's games so special. The excitement you got when you stumbled onto a random location was unmatched. And let me tell you, I went back and played Skyrim to prepare for this video, and there's a reason that game has sold a bajillion copies. Its world still holds up today. Not necessarily graphics, or Fallout 3's gunplay. Todd Howard did not become a successful snake oil salesman by accident. He directed one of the best runs any studio has ever had. Anybody would be drawn to what this man promised if you had a resume like that. But all of these factors led to Bethesda becoming the most well-regarded developer in the business at that time. Nowadays, if you had to name the key problem with Bethesda, it's not that hard if you've been paying attention. Their main problem is ego. Bethesda is a company that seems to think that they can do no wrong, and if you don't like their games, that's your problem. Why haven't you upgraded your PCs yet, you peasants? You know how I mentioned that their games were far from perfect? Yeah, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the games are riddled with bugs and glitches that to this day show up in every game they put out. NPCs that look like horror shows and act like dying Roombas. That may have worked back in the early 2010s, but in 2025, that type of lazy quality control is unacceptable. Since Bethesda's games were so good, they were able to cultivate a loyal, devoted, and ironclad fan base. A fan base that unfortunately has hand-waved a lot of the problems that these games have had because the experience as a whole largely makes up for it. So most of it used to be met with, it's a Bethesda game, which made Bethesda look and go, oh, we have a fan base of suckers that they'll accept anything we give them. Do we really need to fix this? Just look at how Todd Howard talks about bugs in the games, and that tells you all you need to know.
I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs. I did. I read it on the internet, so it's true. And that sometimes it doesn't just work. Anyway, we know together.
And also take a look at how lead writer Emil Pagliarulo stated in an industry talk that the best part about being a game developer is throwing reviews out.
But that's not the end, though. That's not the end of being a video game developer. Because the true mark of being a real developer is, as every developer knows, is waiting for reviews to come in, right? And then reading the reviews, of course, and hopefully, if you get lucky, ignoring the reviews, right? Thank you very much, guys.
Bro, they are straight up telling you they don't care. There was no better indicator that this was Bethesda's attitude than when they put out Fallout 76. Fallout 76 was the prime example of how Bethesda, there's no other way to put it, they took advantage of their fan base. And I don't care how respectable it is now, that title will live in infamy for just how broken it was at launch. On top of the fact that the writing and the quest design in these games have gotten progressively worse in my opinion, leading to their latest launch, good old Starfield, which is the most boring Bethesda game I've ever played. That doesn't even have the benefit of a handcrafted world where I can at least wander around and get lost in. No, instead we have 16 times the loading screens, procedurally generated worlds that have absolutely nothing in them to give the illusion of a massive galaxy with 1,000 planets. Bethesda managed to make a game that modders didn't even want to work on because it was so boring to them. Do you know how hard that is to do?
How am I gonna make a living on these deadbeats? Where'd you get this from, a morgue?
Look,
Oh, come on, what's the point? What's the fucking point? In any case, I gotta argue with you.
So, okay, you had all this criticism from your fan base across all your recent titles, so you know what? Now you had all the time to address this criticism and you're gonna do it, right? Nope. Here's Shattered Space, a DLC expansion that addressed almost none of the complaints that fans of the base game had. Yeah, it's a handcrafted world, and I guess that's the one thing that was addressed, but everyone who's played this thing agreed that it was an uninspired DLC that felt more like cut content from the base game instead of something that is worth $40 to shell out for something. That handcrafted location, Varun Kai, the seat of the mysterious House Varun, somehow had almost nothing interesting to find on the map. Your companion, Andreja, who's from House Varun, barely plays a role in the story, and hey, let's drop the same Crimson Fleet enemies here, even though the story says that Varun Kai is a secret location that they're very protective of, so how are they letting this happen? Oh, they just needed more enemies. Oh, what other answer is there? When you have die-hard Bethesda fans disappointed in Shattered Space, you know something is wrong. And what did Bethesda have to say about this? It's actually the best game we've ever made. And maybe we should have held off adding new features like the buggy until this expansion so players wouldn't bitch about no new features added.
I've never seen such a fearless display of sheer idiocy. Bravo.
If you don't think Bethesda is out of touch after reading that, then I don't know what you're smoking, brother, but give me some. Players' faith in Bethesda has never been lower. Show of hands, how many of you think Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be good after playing Starfield and Shattered Space? And reading those comments from Todd and Emil. The downfall of Bethesda is that their ego has become so big, they genuinely don't think they could do any wrong, and that they know what their fans really want when they could not be farther from the truth. But when one studio falters, another rises to take its place, and the studio that has become the definitive best in the world has been none other than the one who's made a Bethesda game better than Bethesda, and that is FromSoftware. FromSoftware isn't a new company. They've been around for decades now, but why I've included them here is that their rise to power coincided with the downfall of a lot of studios on this list, especially Bethesda around 2015, which is where they started the greatest run I have ever seen a developer have. I don't think it's a stretch to say that FromSoftware, as of this moment, is the best developer in the industry, for a number of reasons. As many of you know, what sets the father of the Souls-like apart is not just how hard they can pummel your ass into oblivion, but that they are the masters of gameplay first. Hidetaka Miyazaki is the exact opposite of Hideo Kojima. Where Kojima wants to present his games like a movie, Miyazaki focuses on how do we make the game as fun as we can to play. Game, play. 99% of the time in games made by FromSoftware, you are in complete control of your character, even in conversations with NPCs, which lets the player feel like they're actually in this world because control is very rarely taken away from you to watch a 5-minute cutscene or be forced to slow walk so the player can admire our world. Oh my god, you see how good these rocks look? Nah, don't want to talk to this guy anymore? Alright, just walk away. Nobody's stopping you. And when there is a cutscene, most of the time, it's f***ing awesome.
Holy shit, dude.
But the challenge that comes with the Souls games only work because the gameplay is so good, and aside from Sekiro, there's no strategy or build that doesn't work, which gives players so many options and so much freedom to build their character how they want. I mean, the best player I've seen that's beaten Melania is butt-ass naked with 2 katanas and a jar on his head without getting hit. If that guy can do it, you can do it too. It seems simple, but it's executed so well in games like this, and that sense of satisfaction you have after beating a Souls boss is unlike anything you will feel in most games. But you know, I put these guys right after Bethesda, and it wasn't just because they had the title of best developers in the biz, but also because of their worlds. While I wouldn't classify the Dark Souls trilogy, Bloodborne, or Sekiro as traditional open world games, where you have a gigantic ass map and a huge sense of scale, there are worlds where you could go anywhere you want at any time to explore to your heart's content, and they still have that same sense of discovery that something like Skyrim had. Like when you first stumble onto Ash Lake in Dark Souls 1, Archdragon Peak in DS3, Forsaken Castle Canehurst, and Bloodborne. And the majority of the time when discovering new locations, you're still in control of your character, so the immersion is still there. Shut up, I know the other two are started by cutscenes. You stumble onto it and it's like, there it is. Holy shit, there it is. Now, if we're talking Elden Ring, that is an open world game that I have said my piece on. It's the greatest game ever made, with an expansion in Shadow of the Erdtree that was so good, the Game Awards changed their criteria just to have it on the list. I mean, come on now. When does that happen? But it would be one thing if FromSoft was just a one-trick pony with a single developer that if he left, everything would be screwed. But what convinced me that they were in fact the best developer was Armored Core 6. Their dormant mech franchise made a return, and it wasn't directed by Miyazaki, and it was still incredible. It showed me that FromSoftware is not just one man, even though if Miyazaki leaves, we're not getting all-time greats again. I'm sorry. It's a studio with a whole host of really talented devs, which, by the way, I don't think I've ever heard any stories about FromSoftware laying off devs, which is wild considering every other major developer has been doing that recently. You want to know what happens when you retain your talent? This. Throughout their history, they have been a studio that has been willing and very, very able to adapt. Oh, you're getting tired of medieval dark fantasy? Well, here's a gothic horror setting. Good luck sleeping at night. Oh, you're getting tired of traditional Souls games? Well, here's the best dueling simulator you've ever seen. Oh, you want open world? We'll give you open world. All of that to then say, oh, you think we could just do Souls games? Well, you want to make mech games cool again? There's a reason that FromSoftware has garnered so much love and trust from gamers, and if you've played their games, you see exactly why. They know what gamers want, and they know when to change it up. And also, unlike Bethesda, they actually listen to their fans. When everybody says they don't want to have long runbacks to bosses anymore, okay, let's put the checkpoint right outside the boss room, or here's the stakes of America. Problem solved. These guys have more than earned the right to dance around like Robbie Rotten singing, now please, Elden Ring Night Rain, don't be a shitty cash grab. Now, even though Bethesda and FromSoftware make RPGs, they're more action RPGs. Not much choice is baked into the game like a traditional RPG that you would think of. If we want to talk RPGs though, we need to bring up the boys who used to be the kings, but are now on life support. It's time to talk Bioware. Oh boy, Bioware, what has happened to you? When you remember Bioware in its heyday, this was a studio that was much like FromSoftware is now, in the fact that these guys could not miss. The run they had from the early 2000s to 2013 was immaculate. Baldur's Gate 2, Neverwinter Nights, Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire, Mass Effect, Dragon Age Origins, Mass Effect 2. Okay, Dragon Age 2 was a miss. But then you had Mass Effect 3. I mean, these guys were on the top of the top when it came to RPGs. Even their MMO, Star Wars The Old Republic, say what you want about the game as an MMO, but as an RPG, I absolutely loved it. What set these guys apart and what made these games so good was its expert writing. Each character and companion you came across was compelling, likable, and had so many layers, it made Shrek start to sweat. Look, I don't know what the Pythagorean theorem is, Mrs. Roberts, but I do know that I'm Garrus Vakarian,
and this is my rectum.
Oh, Couple that with stories that could rival any movie, and you had a recipe for success, especially with its romances. I mean, do you know how good you have to be to get players attracted to an alien that always wears a mask? Hey kids, dinner time, we got thighs tonight. Can you tell I love Mass Effect? Every time these guys touched something, they turned it to gold. And then things went downhill. Dragon Age Inquisition, while winning Game of the Year, was heavily criticized by fans and is still to this day. But it's here that Bioware started to lose a lot of its momentum, as guys like Casey Hudson, who directed the Mass Effect trilogy, left the studio, and then we got Mass Effect Andromeda. Oh god.
Wow, I can't believe this shit is happening. Look at a hand stuck through the body.
The cat have been quiet for too long. See? No reason we can't be civilized.
Sorry, my face is tired from dealing with everything.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
Yeah, my face is a little more than tired after playing that. This was Strike 1, a broken and unfun Mass Effect game. But then they had the absolute disaster that was Anthem, a live service game that failed in every aspect, a game that was plagued by so many development problems that Jason Schreier, while he was still at Kotaku, wrote an entire hour-long article detailing it. Dude, I remember being in one of my college classes and reading this whole thing and just being astonished that a game could be so heavily mismanaged and directionless for so long in development. By the way, it took the entire class time to finish that article. That's how long it was. Strike 2. At this point, BioWare was on its last chance. Big Bad Daddy EA isn't going to tolerate two messes like this in a row. They really needed a win going into their next launch. Instead, we got Dragon Age: The Veilguard, a game that abandoned almost everything Dragon Age was built on. Not being able to be evil, cringe-ass dialogue, unlikable characters. The thing that BioWare was most renowned for was the worst thing about this game: the writing. That's a sign that the BioWare we all knew and loved was dead. Let me put it this way, when your studio embarrasses itself 3 times in a row, and we're not blaming EA for it, mostly, it's time to look in the mirror. Yeah, before Veilguard, BioWare was fumbling in a time where EA was getting hate left and right, and being blamed for everything. But I think Jason Schreier's Anthem article showed everyone that it's mostly BioWare who are at fault and not EA. Yeah, the Frostbite engine being a requirement may make things harder, but the mismanagement and the clear lack of ability to tell a good story is all on BioWare. And it shows in the sales numbers. Recently, EA said in an earnings call that Veilguard missed its projections by 50%, which along with FC25 flopping caused EA stock to tumble off of a cliff. And you can also see this in the fact that, the entire writing team for the game was fired.
You're fired. And in case your ears are fucked, get the fuck out!
It's dire right now for BioWare. Coupled with the news of everybody getting laid off seemingly every week, I wouldn't be surprised if while I'm making this video, BioWare gets shut down and they have nobody to blame but themselves. But it's not all doom and gloom, because when one RPG master falls, another rises to take its place. One that has the good old-fashioned values upon which we used to rely. And in order to explain that, I need to take you down by the river. I don't think I've seen a faster rise in the last few years than I have seen with Larian, the developers of Divinity: Original Sin, which I still haven't played yet. Damn, I gotta get on that. These guys were regarded as good developers, and Divinity is a well-liked RPG series, but they never really had mainstream attention. And then came Baldur's Gate 3, a game so monumental and so expertly crafted that other developers were upset that it would give ungodly expectations to every other game released like it. What does that say about you? If you ask anyone who's played this game what the best thing about it is, you're gonna get the same answer: freedom. The freedom to literally do anything you want, approaching situations however you want. There's no set formula to follow for any scenario, like the 20 different ways you could take out the goblin camp in Act 1. You could do crazy things like turn enemies into sheep. Yes, sheep. You can kill off main characters literally anytime you want. Aw, nice squirrel you got here. You can also romance anyone you want, including a bear and a squid. It's f***ing gross. You don't have to do it, but you can. The world also runs like a real world, like certain side quests won't be available after a certain amount of time, like this one where you have to save a chancellor from a burning house, but if you do a side quest before it, she's already dead. It makes you mindful of your actions, dialogue choices, and most importantly, time management, because you never know what exactly you're going to impact. And they also took the time to choreograph every single dialogue motion. I don't think I ever saw characters have the same movements like in most RPGs. Talk about making your game feel real. And the character creator, I mean, look at my guy. Have you ever seen a more beautiful man in your entire life? If you're trying to remove tadpoles from your head and want someone who could do that and still have time for Netflix and chill, this is your guy. It's wild to think that one game can take a studio from a niche cult following to what many consider the second best developer in the industry behind FromSoftware. This game is still winning awards to this day. That was the power of Baldur's Gate 3. But then you take the studio director, Sven Vink, who is a gigantic middle finger to all modern AAA studio practices. A man who puts players and developers first, who prides himself and Larian on making games that players want to actually play and not just to milk them for what they're worth to satisfy shareholders. And he's not shy about saying it either. Just look at his speech during the Game Awards.
Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. They created it because it hadn't been created before. They didn't make it to increase market share. They didn't make it to serve as a brand. They didn't have to meet arbitrary sales targets or fear being laid off if they didn't meet those targets. And furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They didn't treat their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. They didn't treat their players as users to exploit. And they didn't make decisions they knew were short-sighted in function of a bonus or politics. They knew that if you put the game and the team first, the revenue will follow.
Listen, Gabe! We need more men like Sven Vink, and we need more studios like Larian, which, by the way, before they got Baldur's Gate, they also wanted to work on Fallout. Phil, give it to them. But in every gaming cycle, there unfortunately needs to be somebody we can all point at and laugh on a consistent basis. And you want to talk about laughing at how pathetic somebody has become, then my friend, you can look no further than Ubisoft. What is the biggest train wreck you have ever seen in your life? It doesn't matter, because Ubisoft is worse. It's almost shocking to me that 10 years ago, these guys were seen as the model of consistency. Great franchises like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Tom Clancy, these guys were churning out great games. Not always Game of the Year quality, but they were enjoyable and fun to play. How many of you guys tried speaking Italian after you played as Ezio Auditore? Don't lie to me, we all did. But fast forward to today, and Ubisoft is falling apart at the seams, and almost no game that has been released in the last 5 years has been even close to what they used to put out. They have become the model for everything wrong with the games industry. The same generic video games that refuse to innovate with anything. Scummy pricing and microtransactions. Leadership so bad that morale has leapt off a building. Like everything that couldn't go wrong for a gaming company has gone wrong for Ubisoft. Even to the point of creativity. Every idea they seem to have in their recent games has just been taken from other games. Immortals Phoenix Rising and X Defiant being copies of Breath of the Wild and COD. Every open world game they've had just recycles what they've already done. Outpost and Towers reporting for duty, sir! The Deadeye and Star Wars Outlaws taken from Red Dead Redemption. Like, find me an original idea in any of their games released since 2020. There's probably not going to be a lot. It just feels like the creativity has been completely sucked out of their studios by their vampire of a CEO. Yves Guillemot might be the worst CEO I've ever seen, and that is saying a lot because Don Matrick is also up there. This guy has no idea what he's doing, and every decision he makes just further plummets Ubisoft into the ground, like calling Skull and Bones the first quadruple A game, greenlighting NFT games,
Sweet cream! on an ice cream sandwich. What in the blue hell are you doing?
Stretching your studio so thin so you could put out more games in a year, but none of them end up going well. And when you do get a good game in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crowns, you overprice it so that nobody wants to pay for it. It fails, and the studio ends up being shut down. This is also why I've said that Ubisoft is the most pathetic company in the business, because even though there are more scummy devs and less talented devs, the fact that Ubisoft is both and expects you to just go along with it is laughable. It's like a car dealership selling a 1999 Buick Century for $90,000. It's so outrageous that you can't even be mad, so you just laugh at them instead. Their games are not good enough for the pricing to be this bad. But you know who doesn't seem to know that? The scummy, money-hungry company. But there's one thing that I will personally never forgive them for. I love Assassin's Creed. Or at least I did love Assassin's Creed. These games revolutionized stealth in modern video games. They were all incredibly well made. The stories of all of them were pretty damn good. Yeah, the annual releases started to make the formula feel a little stale, but there wasn't a single one I played that I didn't enjoy out the ass. Okay, maybe not Unity at launch, but now it's great. But then they completely changed it and turned it into the open world RPG series we know it today. And even though Origins was good, it started to not feel like the Assassin's Creed I grew up with, and it made me wary of where the series would go. Turns out, right off a cliff. Odyssey is not Assassin's Creed, no matter how much you like it, and I personally think it's a good game too. It's not Assassin's Creed. Valhalla is everything an open world game should not be, and Mirage was a half-assed game. Yeah, we got stealth focus back, but we're not gonna do anything else with it. Why would we do that?
What do I look like, a guy who's not lazy?
I know at the time the annual releases may have influenced some people's thoughts of the old games, but go play any of them right now, and then go back to the modern games and you will see the difference. Assassin's Creed has just become a generic franchise when it used to be one of the most badass out there, and that is why I will never forgive them. All of this has caused a complete and total meltdown for Ubisoft. Their stock is in the tank, their fans are completely gone, and they're on the verge of being bought out by Tencent. It all rests on the shoulders of Assassin's Creed Shadows, which has been about as bungled as it could possibly have been before launch. I would wish you luck, but you wouldn't know what to do with it if you got it, and you have nobody to blame but yourselves. Kind of a common theme here. But then you have a studio that sort of has similarities to Ubisoft, in that they were involved in a lot of games, but unlike them, they don't seem to f*** up as much, especially recently. They are the weapon of the cavalry captains.
Oh my god, that was f***ing atrocious.
Okay, now this one might be a little weird, but just hear me out. Saber Interactive is not a new developer by any means. They've been around since 2001, and like Ubisoft, had their hands in a ton of games from both the development and publishing side of things. And a lot of them had been kind of middle of the road. They had games that reviewed decently, and even some like Insurgent Sandstorm that most people seem to like. But most of this action was in 2020, when they were under the umbrella of the God of Rot himself, Embracer Group. You've all heard the horror stories. The guys who buy up anything and everything just to shut down games and studios just because they have no idea how to manage it. Well, Saber survived under that, where I'm sure Embracer was feeding them ideas that had no real staying power, despite the decent overall reception. It seems like they never made a really bad game, but then they split from Embracer in March of last year, and in September, they would release a small game that you may or may not have heard of it. It's called Space Marine 2. In my humble opinion, Space Marine 2 is the embodiment of what makes video games great. Sometimes all it takes to make a good video game is a heavy bolter, a chainsword, and a horde of Xenos filth just ready to be purged.
It appears we have their attention, and they have ours. Unfortunate for them.
It's a game that reminds you that at the core of every video game experience should be an addicting gameplay loop, and that should be your main focus before you branch out into other things like world building and writing and all that other good stuff. And speaking of writing, the writing in this game, I mean, damn.
I thought a beast of that stature would offer more sport. It was outnumbered. I once faced a Carnifex alone, but nothing but a bow pistol. That was sport. Well, I am glad to share in the glory of this kill.
I've already said in other videos that the dialogue in Space Marine 2 will put hair on your chest, and for those of you who have played, you know exactly what I mean. It also shows that these guys do their homework and fully commit themselves to the process. Warhammer is a massive universe with decades of lore and books that you have to read just to understand the universe, and these guys managed to create one of, if not the most immersive and accurate depiction of the Warhammer universe in a video game on their first try. So much so that it got me invested in Warhammer and sent me down the mandatory rabbit hole of lore, explanations, and all the reasons that Lorgar Aurelian is a horse's asshole. You would be lying to yourself if you think that that is not impressive. I cannot understate just how much this game did for the Warhammer universe and for Saber's brand as a whole, made better by the CEO of Saber himself, Matthew Kark, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, leaving a YouTube comment on an Asmongold video that pretty much echoed the sentiment that Space Marine 2 gave off. When we signed the deal to make Space Marine 2, all I wanted was a throwback game. We had the chance to work on something which by its nature was old school. I can't even comprehend many of the current games that we play these days. They are too complex and too much of an investment. We worked on Halo back in the day, and that game could be distilled down to the simplest of shooting loops, but it was entirely addicting. That is what we wanted to recapture. I hope that games like Space Marine 2 and Wukong are the start of a reversion to a time when games were simply about fun and immersion. I spent some time as Chief Operating Officer at Embracer, and I saw games there that made me want to cry with their overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers. We just want to do some glory kills and get the heart rate up a little. For me, that is what games should be about. Ladies and gentlemen, just like Allstate, we are in good hands. I bet most of you didn't even know who Saber Interactive was before Space Marine 2, but you sure as hell know their name now. If you made a game so good that I am now excited for any game going forward that has your logo on it, you know you've become one of the top developers, especially now that you're out from under Embracer's thumb, and Space Marine 2 was developed mostly while they were still a part of them. What the hell's Turok Origins or Jurassic Park Survival gonna look like fully independent from them? If any of you doubt my praise of Saber, I will leave you with this final question. How do you feel about the Knights of the Old Republic remake, knowing that these guys are now gonna be the ones developing it? Yeah, I thought so. For the final section here, I feel we all need a little just brief moment of silence. You treated us well, Master Chief. Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because this isn't a studio, it's a franchise, but I don't think you can talk about the gaming landscape changing without mentioning the violation of the godfather of our love for gaming. What has been done to Halo should be prosecuted in a criminal court. Like, out of all the examples I gave of a studio on a downward turn, this one actually hurts me. I don't need to tell you about how monumental and how influential Halo used to be. The midnight release videos that you've all seen should tell you all you need to know. You girls want to know what the guys were doing after school that we couldn't go to the movies with you? We were blowing elites to bits. My history with Halo is something I will cherish forever. It was the first rated M franchise I ever played. My mom would only let me play with my older brother. I didn't understand it at the time. It didn't seem that bad. And then I saw the blood in Guilty Spark and I was like, oh, that makes sense. The amount of times me and my brother have played the opening level, Pillar of Autumn, and still laugh to this day when this guy gets blown the back. It was also the only game my dad loves. He doesn't know what I'm talking about with this shit, but what he does understand is the cage on Halo Reach. He loves that map. Don't ask me why. Even though me and my brother always destroy him, we were a Halo family. So you can imagine the anger I felt when me and my dad sat down to play Halo 5 Guardians. The second controller icon wouldn't come up. We went to GameStop to ask what gives, only to have them say, Halo 5 doesn't have split screen co-op. What the f*** you mean it doesn't have split screen? Ever since 343 has had the Halo license, it has been a bungled, mismanaged mess. Halo 4 came out, the story was a roller coaster, the level design was also straight up horrible, and the new Promethean enemies were just boring compared to the Flood. Even in Halo 5, they just feel like second, less interesting Covenant, which by the way, that's back now. No real explanation was given for the Covenant returning after Halo 3, so good writing, I guess. Oh, and in between, they launched the Halo Master Chief Collection, completely broken. Just some more salt in the wound right there. Oh, come on! And speaking of Halo 5, do I even need to mention that disaster of a campaign that you need to read the entire contents of the Jedi Archive just to understand what's happening? 343 trying to turn Halo into Call of Duty, the art style of the Spartans being butchered, Vale, what is this? Cortana is a villain now, which I will absolutely not accept. It was horrible. Halo 5 was the game where fans started to turn away in droves, and people started to wonder whether 343 should really be in charge of this iconic IP. But hey, we're rebooting the franchise with Halo Infinite, an open-world Halo game on an actual Halo ring. Well, Kig Yar Mai Sang Healy, it looks like we're back.
Oh no.
You want to give players a gut punch? Launch the Prove It game for 343's Halo cycle, have it be a live service, and barely launch with any features. No split screen co-op, no Forge, no Slayer playlist. Are you guys sleeping? Here, let me help you. Game modes like Last Spartan Standing that come out and then are removed because the game couldn't handle the player numbers. It's a shame because I thought the campaign was pretty good, even though it has its flaws, like completely abandoning the end of Halo 5. I mean, I know it was terrible, but you can't just throw it out with no resolution. But how Infinite's multiplayer was handled, or better yet, not handled at all, was the moment where everyone stood up and collectively said, fire 343. This studio had 3 attempts to make a good content-filled Halo game, and they failed at every one in every stage. Couple that with allowing that sin against humanity that was the Halo TV show to happen. Did nobody at the studio have to sign off on this? Were you okay with it? Oh yeah, these guys are changing the lore, introducing characters that no one cares about, ruining established characters, having Master Chief out of his armor for most of the show. Yeah, we're fine. Go with that. Have a blast, guys. Do what you want. Cheeks! I never thought I would ever be saying this, but Halo has become uncool. And then you expect me to be excited after your rebrand and move to Unreal Engine? You expect me to give you a standing ovation when you change your name to Halo Studios? Bro, you don't even deserve to be associated with Halo. You've done nothing but fail. And yeah, I know management has changed and they've documented that working with the Slipspace engine took time away from the important things about the game, which is why they switched, and I genuinely hope things will get better. But forgive me if I'm not thrilled that you still have the license. Also, your logo looks like shit. How the face of Xbox was allowed to be ruined like this is absolutely mind-boggling to me, and Halo Infinite on its own is how not to do a live service. And you know, throughout this video, the good and bad studios have been similar to each other. I've tried to keep it like that, but this one is a very specific case because there's nothing like Halo, which is why it hurts more that it's in the state that it's in. But there is one thing similar, specifically when it comes to Halo Infinite. If you want a textbook on how to ruin a live service, then you look at Halo Infinite. But if you want the textbook on how to run a live service, all you need is democracy. When most people hear the term live service, they start to shudder in fear before taking out their bingo card of scummy practices that every one of these games seems to have. Live service has gotten such a bad rep over the past decade. Even though many are relatively tame when it comes to how they monetize, there's been so many bad ones that were just predatory, grindy, underbaked disasters that the term live service isn't exactly going to get a girl to go on a date with you. Neither is how you're dressed. And then a little studio named Arrowhead showed up with a game known as Helldivers 2, and it completely blew everybody out of the water. A live service game is part of Sony's 12-pick draft class that is filled with bust after bust. But after playing this one, you see why they keep trying. As the title suggests, Arrowhead had previously made the first Helldivers, a seemingly well-liked game, but didn't get a lot of attention. But Arrowhead's second attempt nailed almost everything that a good live service should do. In my original video when I talked about it, I said that Helldivers 2 was the third wake-up call for the industry. The first being Elden Ring with open-world games, and the second being Baldur's Gate 3 with freedom and RPGs. But Helldivers 2 was a wake-up call in the sense that it showed everybody that live service games do not need to be scummy, repetitive grind fests in order to cultivate a strong player base. What you need is an awesome premise, addicting gameplay, and strong developer support, which is what this game had tenfold. And you also don't need to sink hundreds of millions of dollars into it and balloon your budget, so if you don't grab that cash now, you're absolutely screwed. This game's budget was estimated to be between 50 and 100 million over an 8-year development cycle, priced at $40, and it came out around the same time when $70 Skull and Bones and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League were embarrassing themselves at the family dinner.
That's it, Billy, get the hell out of here!
This on top of the amazing graphics and incredible sound design, which really makes you feel like you're in a war zone. But the sense of player community is what makes Helldivers 2 so great. Every player is working in tandem to push back the enemies of Super Earth. The liberation status of each planet is determined by how many players actually play and finish the campaigns. So when you're losing a planet like Malevelon Creek and every player starts flocking towards it, that status is going to go way up. And when you lose it, like we did so long ago, it's because we, the players, couldn't finish missions, which is why you see so much camaraderie, the memes, and calls to arms for Super Earth, because we are actually defending Super Earth. It's not just a tagline. Not to mention that despite being a part of PlayStation Studios, Arrowhead is a AA studio. They only have like 130 people working there, and these guys managed to churn out content like it's nothing, like it was a blitz at launch. In fact, the relationship with PlayStation has been more of a hindrance than a benefit. We all remember this. And while it hasn't been perfect with unnecessary bug fixes and balancing that pissed players off, Arrowhead got back on the right track and they're now in the players' good graces again. And you have to think they're going to learn from this when they make their next game, which is why hearing their name attached to any other project is going to fill me with confidence. Because how can you play and experience Helldivers 2 and not have confidence that any live service concept with these guys is going to be good? That's how you announce yourselves. That is how you give the industry a wake-up call. Gaming has changed so much over the years, and while there may be some of your old heroes that have lived long enough to see themselves become the villains, the new guard is still doing its part to keep the flame of gaming alive. And throughout this video, there are also more rising studios that I could have mentioned, like Game Science, NeoWiz, Grinding Gear Games, and Warhorse, especially after Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is my next video. Stay tuned for that. And you still have studios like Capcom, Rockstar, and id Software that are still going strong, so gaming is not going anywhere. But for the ones who have fallen, it's important that these lessons be learned so that they don't happen as frequently, and maybe so that these guys can rebound. Just because there is change doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom, and it's rising players with the creativity and the passion that these old studios used to have. It's that will come together to keep gaming great. So that's all from me. I hope you guys got something out of this, or were at least entertained, because why watch it otherwise? So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace!